So Motorola has beaten its big rival Samsung in the 2024 flip phone stakes by just a couple of weeks with this here Motorola RAZR 50 Ultra. And the RAZR is a tiny bendy wonder with a front screen that is incredibly versatile, and I've had my SIM secreted inside it for a week now, using it as my full-time phone. So is it a dinky delight, or is it a mini piece of shit? Here's my RAZR 50 Ultra review, and for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! As with all flip phones, this Moto is beautifully dinky. It's quite unusual having a phone that actually jiggles around in your pocket compared with all of the 6.7-inch monsters that I've had to squeeze in there recently. And you know your Uncle Spurt, he likes a bit of jiggle. And that front display is coated in Gorilla Glass Victus, so far completely scratch-free, and should prove pleasingly shatter resistant as well if you happen to fumble this thing, which thankfully so far I haven't. And so far that 6000 series aluminium frame is in perfect nick too, and it matches the colour of the vegan leather arse. And you got a choice of 4 colour options here: green, blue, peach or hot pink. Gotta say, I rather like all of them. I wouldn't even say no to a bit of hot pink, though it is rather in your face. This green effort's certainly a bit more subtle, a bit more moody, and that soft touch finish just feels really nice against your palm as well. It's great stuff. And the Moto RAZR 50 Ultra is IPX8 water resistant, so absolutely fine if you drop it in your bathtub, you can take in the shower, etc. But that hinge really does not like grit or sand or anything like that. You'll be quite distressed on the crunching noises that come out of this thing when you get a bit of grit in there. Basically sounds like my joints first thing in the morning. The RAZR's 4-inch POLED screen fills that front end, allowing you to run basically any app you ballywell like. You can access your apps with a quick flick like so, and this app menu is completely customizable, so you can add apps in, you can take apps off just with a quick tap like so, and naturally rearrange them as well based on how often you actually use them. And if you keep on flicking, you've got all your various widgets, which are again completely customizable. All you got to do is pinch in like so. You can fast access any widget, or if you tap edit you can remove some and chuck some fresh ones in. And all of your apps can be run full screen just by long pressing the nav bar, but as you can see, those massive camera lenses do get right in the bloody way a lot of the time. So you're generally better off running them in this more cropped compact mode. And I tried to use that dinky display as much as humanly possible for all of my apps during my week with the RAZR 50 Ultra. I found it did the job for most apps, but as Motorola itself points out, it can't guarantee that apps won't act a complete tit on this tiny thing. Not their exact words, but more or less. So for instance, I found that sometimes in maps the sensitivity was a little bit balky when I was trying to zoom in and out, though it often behaved itself. I certainly felt a lot more comfortable doing turn-by-turn navigation on this compact wee blow rather than a massive 7-incher. It's a lot more subtle, which is particularly good if you're wandering around somewhere where dickheads on mopeds tend to rip phones out of people's hands. The likes of Chrome are perfectly usable as well, as long as you're not trying to navigate anything too complicated. Although I've got to say, the likes of Spotify certainly felt a bit cramped at times. It's not the easiest to find an album you're looking for. Luckily, you do actually have a dedicated Spotify app on this bad boy. It's rather limited, but it's quick and easy for jumping back into an album you recently listened to. And typing in messaging apps isn't a horrendous experience. The actual keyboard size is probably about the same as what you get on most phones anyway. The only problem being that it actually takes up the entire screen, so good luck trying to refer back to any previous messages or anything. And things get proper hairy if you try anything particularly complicated, like, God forbid, inserting an emoji. Now when you shut the RAZR 50 Ultra, it doesn't automatically hibernate. Instead, the sleep screen pops up on that dinky cover display. And if you happen to be listening to any music or a podcast or whatever, this means that media controls will immediately flash up. So you've got to remember to actually hibernate the phone before you slip the bloody thing back into your pocket, because otherwise what will happen is you'll end up skipping tracks or skipping entire podcasts, audiobook chapters. And frankly, it's more annoying than being stuck in a lift with Michael McIntyre. And likewise, sometimes when I've just had the RAZR stuffed in my pocket and I've been walking somewhere, it'll be jiggling around enough to wake it up. And if that screen's facing my leg, then again, sometimes I end up with a skipped audiobook chapter or going haywire, basically. Again, about as much fun as Michael McIntyre in a confined space with no blunt weaponry within easy reach. I'm very happy to see an always on display for that cover screen so you can quickly check for any awaited notifications, etc. And also I just love the geeky retro goodness of the media controls, which can be fully customized if you dive on into the settings. Got a small variety of options to choose from. And in those external display settings, you can also jump into something called desk display and set up tent mode, which I rather ruddy like. Basically just stick the RAZR down on any surface like so and it will automatically enter tent mode. As you can see, you can have it displaying album art whenever you've got some music playing. Or alternatively, you can turn the RAZR 50 Ultra into a clock or a digital photo frame. And there's also an option to wake the phone whenever you wave your hand or any other conveniently available body part in front of the cameras. And the actual quality of that cover screen is top notch as well. You've got a 1272 by 1080 pixel resolutions. Those visuals are perfectly crisp. It's LTPO tech as well, raising up to 165 Hz refresh. It's easy on the eyes, in low light and everything, no complaints. Now Motorola reckons that the RAZR 50 Ultra is easier than ever to flip open, and I gotta say I certainly haven't struggled this past week. Even with my weak ass thumbs, I can generally get it open in a single swipe like so. I did find I'd occasionally accidentally mash the volume buttons when I was doing it, but I kind of adjusted my grip and learned how to not do that. And when you do flip it open, you'll reveal a 6.9-inch POLED display, which is ideal for gaming or a bit of movie action, as well as multitasking with two apps side by side. The crease in the middle is rather slight. I didn't even notice it most time I was using the RAZR 50 Ultra. And it is a very subtle dip when you're running your thumb over it as well, so you can barely even feel it. A big ol' internal panel is good for your gaming and cinematic fare thanks to its long and thin aspect ratio. Nice and crispy as well with its 2640 by 1080 pixel resolution. Not quite so handy when it comes to watching TV shows, YouTube shenanigans, etc. as you get some pretty major pillar boxing. And when you zoom in, you end up cropping quite a bit out. But you can always just chuck that stuff on the cover screen instead. That's what I usually did. You've apparently got HDR10 Plus support on the internal panel as well as the cover screen, but Netflix is still refusing to acknowledge this. And the internal panel, once again, LTPO tech up to 165 Hz. I found the screen was bright enough for outdoor use, although that shiny protective coating is highly reflective as usual, so you'll have to tilt the phone about the place on sunny days to get an angle that works. And the stereo speakers are perfectly decent. Proper loud, but respectable quality at the same time. Now to unlock your RAZR 50 Ultra, you've got an edge-mounted fingerprint sensor built into the power button, and it's pretty bloody good. I've had no jip from this. Even when the phone is unfurled like so, it's not hideously high up that really long edge, so you can just about stretch to it. And no surprises from the software, good old Motorola has once again stuck with a stock Android experience. I'm certainly a fan of this as always, and of course Moto has chucked in its usual selection of apps. The Moto app is a proper banger when you want to just customize your smartphone, change up the lock screen, the external display, the icons, yada yada. Got all the usual excellent gesture support including, oh yeah baby, fast flashlight, flip for D&D, etc, etc. Definitely check out Moto Secure as well. This is packed with all kinds of great features. Some great stuff to keep you safe online. I also really like the pin pad scramble feature as well, definitely a good one. And Smart Connect is good as well for beaming your content to an external display, sharing your apps and files, etc. And Motorola has rather generously chucked in 512 gigs of storage as well, which I've barely made a dent in. Even Genshin took up just a tiny fraction of it. So no real biggie that it's not expandable via micro SD. And speaking of Genshin as well, let's touch on the performance here. And the Motorola RAZR 50 Ultra is powered by Qualcomm's Snapdragon 8S Gen 3, which is a slightly stripped back version of the Billy Big Bollocks Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. And while Samsung's probably going to go for the next level up, the proper 8 Gen 3 for its Z Flip phone, I felt that the everyday performance here on the RAZR 50 Ultra was perfectly fine with that 8S Gen 3. I thought my only real complaint this past week is the fact that the top edge did get rather toasty when I was doing video chat shenanigans on the likes of Skype. And as usual, I put in a good shift on Genshin Impact. I felt the performance was remarkably good here on the RAZR 50 Ultra. Maxed out those graphics settings, set it to 60 frames per second, and the action stayed pretty fluid. It's very rare to see any proper stumbles in that frame rate, despite the fact that the phone is obviously quite compact compared with some rivals. The handset did start to warm up again, certainly after about sort of half an hour-ish of playtime. And I was starting to get a little bit worried that I'd start to see some throttling, but touch wood, the performance stayed stable. My other concern with the RAZR 50 Ultra when I started reviewing it was the battery life, because you've only got a 4000 mAh capacity cell stuffed inside this dinky foldable frame. However, once again, this Motorola blower did a job. I think only one day of the past week I've had to bung a cable in it for a bit before I was all tucked up with Teddy, just to give it a bit of extra juice, get it through the full day. But otherwise, about 5 to 6 hours of screen on time, mixed between, of course, the cover screen and the internal display. Generally, a single charge will be enough. And of course, I didn't finish every day in, the serious dregs of the battery. I was in battery saver mode in the evenings, which is what you'd basically expect from a flip phone. If you're a more demanding user, you'll want to go with a bigger foldable for sure. But I was happy enough, especially as you've got 45 watt wide charging support. So if you do need a quick top up, just chuck a cable in it for 10 minutes, get an extra hour or two of use. And yeah, you've even got a bit of 15 watt wireless charging support here. But what about that camera tech? Well, you've got a 50 megapixel primary shooter with optical image stabilization, and that's backed by a secondary 50 megapixel snapper, this time a telephoto shooter with 2x optical zoom. And I certainly preferred having this to an ultra-wide shooter. It was great for getting up-close portrait shots without shoving the RAZR 50 Ultra right in your subject's mug. And it's also good for those far-off touristy pics with what appears to be a wee bit of AI sharpening when you really crop in. On particularly sunny days, you will notice some lens flaring and other light-based issues, but the Motorola RAZR 50 Ultra is respectable enough when it comes to dodgy HDR type situations, whether you're shooting against a bright blue sky or light bulbs in a dark interior. Colours are usually really well represented. They're not blanched when the lighting is against you, or not boosted to super vibrant, vivid, surrealistic hues. And no complaints with lower light snaps either, other than Motorola's usual focusing issues. Just make sure you actually tap on your subject when things are a bit dingy. And oh yeah, as I may have possibly mentioned before, make sure that the RAZR 50 Ultra is actually properly locked when you slip it back into your pants. Otherwise you'll likely end up with lots of interesting shots of the inside of your pocket. But yeah, overall, the RAZR 50 Ultra is a decent wee snapper for a flippy phone. Flick over onto video mode and you can capture up to 4K resolution footage, and once again I was on the whole pretty happy with the results. Panning is smooth and the stabilization is good enough for wandering around while you are recording. Did notice some saturation on very bright days, but nothing too surprising there. And of course you can zoom in when needed using that secondary lens to get a bit closer to the action. The audio pickup was fantastic on the RAZR 50 Ultra. You can clearly hear vocals even at a distance, and on breezy days, the RAZR was smart enough to counter that wind noise. And even in low light, you'll get some fairly respectable video results. And inside the RAZR 50 Ultra, built into that internal display, you've got yourself a 32 megapixel final camera. And I've got to admit, I never really use this for anything. If I was Skyping or Zooming or whatever, I would just use the dual lens setup on the front with the cover screen. Someone might find a use for this selfie cam, but personally I just never needed it. And as always, your subjects can use that cover display as a mirror to check their hair. They're fortunate enough to have it. Otherwise, you can flash up a whole bunch of distracting cartoon faces, which is quite handy if you're trying to snap a toddler or whatever. And yeah, that cover screen more than big enough to comfortably use as a viewfinder. If you are snapping selfies, you can use the volume keys as a shutter button, and of course flash up the old palm gesture instead. And of course the results are usually pretty good with full portrait mode shenanigans if you want it. So there you have it, my lovelies. That in a nutshell is what I reckon of Motorola's fresh new RAZR 50 Ultra flippable phone. And of course it can be a wee bit shonky every now and then, as apps are not designed to run on a dinky little square display like so. But the sheer convenience of it all, the fact that you've got such a compact blower, I reckon makes it worthwhile. And one thing's for sure, the Galaxy Z Flip is going to have to work pretty bloody hard to beat this thing. That's what I reckon anyway. It'd be great to hear your thoughts on the Motorola RAZR 50 Ultra down in the comments below. Please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell for more on the latest and greatest tech. And have yourselves a ruddy, wonderful rest of the week. Cheers everyone. Love you.